let everyone know this FOResT software is still in development. It's available for the public to use, but as we go along, we'll be pointing out some things that are going to be needing further tweaks and updates. So it is a work in progress, and we're always open to comments, suggestions, criticisms, and the goal here is to make a product that it helps everyone, not just the main FOResT service, but you and the public, to get your work done out in the real world for us. So again, any comments and suggestions, criticisms are more than welcome. We'd much rather hear about them and have the opportunity to help you and get them corrected so you can do your work better. Before I hand it over to Dan and Mort, I just wanted to thank the team that we had put together to put FOResT together. The members are Stephen Nicholas, Adam Cates, Greg Miller, George Harris, Joe Mintz, Don Mancius, Morton Mosswild, and Dan Jacobs. And this process started, well, now it's over 15 months ago, back in August of 2019. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Mort and Dan, and they're going to start with the overview session for probably 40 to 45 minutes to an hour, and we'll take a break, and then we'll do an in-depth demo where we get into the details of FOResT. So thank you for joining, and again, remind everyone to make sure that their microphones are muted and their cameras are off. Thank you.
Hey, Greg, this is Dan. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
Okay.
Is that working, Greg?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay. Yep. All right, so, and you can see my cursor as well?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, this is Dan Jacobs. I'm a district forester with the Maine Forest Service, and I'm a recent addition to the team here, just helping out with the presentations and some of the testing of the product. I'm going to be sharing this overview presentation with Morton Mosswild. He's our field team leader, and we'll each take about half of the presentation. This will just be an overview. Then we'll take a brief break, and then Greg Lord, our computer wizard and the team leader for the project, will take over and do an in-depth demo of FOResT. So FOResT is the FOResT Online Resource Tool. It's our online notification system, and this is a new product. This is a list of the topics for the overview presentation. I'll cover a little bit of the history of notifications. I'll give a brief overview of the basic functions of FOResT, and then we'll walk through step by step the process. Partway through this piece, this bullet point, I'll hand it off to Mort, and he will cover some of the process, and he will talk about the timeline for the rollout of this and landowner reports and some other things. So we have several more of these webinars that are going to happen in January and February. Greg, I'm sure, will give out the list of dates, but if you feel like you want to attend another one of these webinars, you can. And there's also a lot of good information on our FOResT webpage. The other thing I should just briefly mention is that I use the term FON quite a bit, F-O-N, and that just means notification or operations notification. So this is a brief history of the notification requirement. starting in 1989 with the Forest Practices Act. Notifications have been required for timber harvesting operations. There are some exemptions to this particular rule, but in general, where timber is being harvested and sold, you need to have a notification. Up until now, the process has been done on paper. Paper forms, kind of carbon copies sent into the Maine Forest Service with some response letters sent back. There's also an amendment process that requires paper. So a lot of paper being passed back and forth through the mail, and a lot of postage being used on both sides, the submitter and on the Maine Forest Service side. I know this system has been in use for a long time. I've seen notifications is dated as early as 1991. So I'm guessing that the system probably went into effect in 1990 or early 91. But a lot of paper has been passed back and forth. A lot of postage has been used, and a lot of data on our end has had to be entered into the computer. So all that information that comes in on paper is entered by one of our staff members in Augusta. Currently, that's Stephen Nicholas, who enters all that information. So a lot of work in managing that data. And I'm a kind of a fan of paper. I'm a forester. I like paper tally sheets. I like maps that are on paper. But in testing this product, I think that it has some really nice features, and there's some really good value in this product. So I'm a big critic of new technology, and I've been through this testing process for a while, and I think there's a lot of benefit to this system that we have. So most everyone is aware of the rules surrounding the FON process or the notification process. The complete list of rules is Maine Forest Service Rules Chapter 26. These can be found on the Maine Forest Service website. These can also be found on the Secretary of State website. And you can also use this link in the presentation to go directly to those rules. A 6-digit number is attached to each FON. This is changing with the new FOResT system. This will be a 7-digit number. But that 6-digit number, there are a couple of uses that are required by law and by the rules. First, that number needs to be posted at a primary yard for the timber harvest or primary access to multiple yards. And that number is used on the trip ticket when wood is delivered for its first measurement or for sale. So those are the basic rules. The FON is a critical piece when you're doing a timber harvest. So what is FOResT? In a nutshell, it's an online system to submit notifications. It allows you to manage notifications in a sense, and eventually it will be a system that allows users to do landowner reports as well. And I believe that is still under development. This system went live January 1st, and people have already been using the system. There is a timeline for the elimination of the paper FON, and I have heard, I don't know if this is still true, but that will be the end of March, beginning of April, but that timeline may have been altered a little bit. And eventually the landowner report process will also be on FOResT and online. This has been under development for over a year. Most of the development was done by Maine Forest Service staff with a private contractor. Greg Lord, who spoke first, was the lead person for the team. I expect we're going to have a lot of questions today, and that's good. We've had a lot of questions so far, and there's a question and answer sheet that summarizes all of that information on the FOResT webpage. And that webpage, I think Mort's going to talk a little bit more about that in a while. That webpage has tons of good information, some videos that are helpful, and kind of a step-by-step guide on how to go through the process of creating a FON. These are some of the key features of the FOResT product. The FON in FOResT follows the paper FON structure very closely. In fact, a lot of the questions are identical, and if they're not identical, they're very similar, but the structure is set up the same way. The same basic information is required in this system as on the paper form. Each user is going to have an online account that is set up. We'll go through that process in some detail today. We'll go through it in this overview, and then we'll also go through it. Greg will go through it when he does the demo. There's digital mapping that's a component of the FON or the FOResT system. And this allows you to draw your harvest area, roads, and stream crossings. This is a pretty nice feature, and it's got some good data checks embedded within it. So I think this is going to be a nice feature of the system. The whole process of creating a FON is step by step, and you are not allowed to move from one step to the next unless you've completed the step you're working on. So I think what's going to end up happening is with the paper product, we have had a lot of incomplete notifications where information is either missing or there may be some error in how the information was put on the paper form. This new electronic format should eliminate almost all of that. So there should be very, very few incomplete notifications once the system is fully deployed. The system also requires digital signatures, and this is something that we will cover in much more detail coming up. All parties on the notification are notified when the FON has been completed and accepted. And like I said, there will eventually be a landowner report component to this. I'm going to move forward. This is what I would call the home page for FOResT. And some of the things that I'll just point out really quickly here are when you get to this home page, there is a button in the upper right to sign in if you already have an account. And there's also a button in the lower right to create an account if you don't already have one. The creating the account process is pretty simple, and we'll walk through that a couple of times this morning. This page is accessed from the main Forest Service website homepage. When you get to our homepage, there's a big button for FOResT, and that will take you into the FOResT part of our website. And from there, you can click another button to get to this point we're at right now, this FOResT homepage. Okay, I just got a little message that took my attention for a second, and now I'm back with you. Okay, so I'm going to cover some of the user functions. This, in a sense, is sort of the steps that are used to create a FON. The first step that you'll need to do when using this system is you need to create an account. All parties that are listed on a FON are going to have an account set up. And there has been a lot of questions about this in past webinars. We expect some questions today, and we expect to continue to come up with better and better answers all the time. So you then, once you have created an account, you can sign into an existing account and you can start a new notification. You can also get into notifications that are in a draft form. Once you've started your notification, the first main step in the process of completing the FON is to indicate your role in the harvest, whether you're a landowner, designated agent, maybe you're also a licensed forester or the harvester. Step 2 in the process is the mapping of the harvest location and the activities. Like I said, this is a pretty nice feature. I'll go through a couple of slides on the mapping in the overview, and then Greg will really do a nice demo of how to create a map. Like I mentioned, you can work on draft notifications and save draft notifications. And in a minute, I'll have a slide that shows our desktop, which is a nice way to see all the activity that's going on in your account. Once a notification has been filled out, all the steps have been completed, you can sign and certify the notification. And we're going to go through that process. Mort is going to be the one that covers that in the greatest amount of detail. And Greg will also cover that in a lot of detail in the demo. Okay, so this slide is about creating an account. And like I said, when you're at the FOResT homepage, there's 2 buttons that you can click on. There is a button to sign in if you have an account, and there is a button to create an account. And this is the create an account button here. Once you click on that, this is just a little piece of the screen that you'll see. This is like a little screenshot, but the information that you have to enter to create an account is similar to creating most online accounts. Your name and address and things like that, your email. You will have to create a password. For me, when I did this with our demo version, there are some rules to follow when you create a password, so it took me a couple of tries. So of everything, when you're using this system, remembering your password is a pretty critical piece. This might be if you folks have purchased licenses, hunting and fishing licenses online. These accounts may be similar to like your Moses ID. Once you create an account, you're going to be issued a FOResT ID number. So that would be similar to the Moses ID number that IF&W uses. In general, creating the account is a pretty easy process. And I don't think most people will have difficulty with this if they have access to a computer and know a little bit about using computer technology. But I know we're going to have some questions regarding this piece. So the sign-in process, this is also fairly straightforward. At the FOResT homepage, there is a sign-in button in the upper right-hand corner. Once you click that, you will then be taken to a screen that asks you to enter your email and your password. Once you've done that, you will be brought to this dashboard. And this dashboard image here on this slide is just a small screenshot. It's a small section of the dashboard. The next slide, I believe, will be a better image that we can talk about that feature. But after you sign in, you're going to go directly to the dashboard. And this is the dashboard. This is where you would start when you are creating a notification. This is where you would be able to get back into your pending notifications and work on them if they're in a draft format. The dashboard gives a nice overview of the activity in your account. And so you can see that there are pending notifications listed and active notifications listed. And I'll just, I think a few of the important features here are circled. There is a create notification button. So if you want to start a new notification, click on that. Like I mentioned, here is your pending notifications, and you can see if the notification has not been certified and is not active, there is no number associated with it. Get my cursor here. So this is your pending notification here. The active notifications down below in this image are listed here, and you can see that this one does have a notification number attached to it, and it's now a 7-digit notification number, not the 6-digit notification number that we used to use. The other thing that you'll notice, I believe this shows up throughout FOResT, not just on the dashboard. This FOResT user ID number, and that's an important piece when you are finalizing your notification. If you want to view one of your notifications, you can use this view button here. So if I want to take a look at this notification for Belfast, I would click on view and I can get into that. Because that's a pending notification, I can still edit it and work with it. So who can create a notification? The notifier can be a landowner or a designated agent, and the notifier just means the person who is creating the notification. The system does allow a person to be more than one, have more than one role in the notification. So a designated agent may also be a licensed forester or a harvester, but only a landowner or designated agent can fill out the notification. And there may be some questions on this. I think we have pretty good answers to those questions at this point. One of the nice features about FOResT that I probably should have mentioned earlier in a little bit more detail is that you can't move from step to step unless the step that you're working on is complete. So there's a lot of checks in this online system, and if you don't indicate that you're either a landowner or a designated agent, you will not be able to move further into the process. Okay, creating a notification, creating a new notification. Once you're in the dashboard, as I mentioned, you will click on the Create Notification button, and that will start the process. If you look at the lower section of this slide, you will see that there's a little line, like a timeline, and that will show the steps in the process that you're working on. This is a really nice feature. Like I said, you can move backwards in the process, but you can only move forwards if you've completed the section that you're on correctly. So the overview, we'll go through each of these steps in some detail in this overview presentation. But the overview is where you identify your role in the harvest, indicate the town that you're working in, and put in the timeline for the harvest activities. The mapping section, we'll hit this in quite a bit of detail, but there's some nice data checks embedded within this. And how you map and where you map your activities and what activities you map will dictate to some extent the questions you have to answer in this activity detail step. So if you're in a LUPC town, a Chapter 27 town, and you indicate that there's going to be a road built on your map, you will get questions specific to that. So it's kind of nice that it gears things towards your activities and your location. The contacts, this is where you're going to enter the information for the landowner, the designated agent, forester, all the people that are a part of this are going to be listed in the contacts section or the contacts step. And then finally, the summary. Once you've completed all the prior steps, there's going to be a summary where you can go and look at all the information that you've entered in a summarized form. And there's also a set of reminders for if you're working near or in protection subdistricts or regulated areas. There's a series of reminders that are basically linked to the mapping that will appear and give you a little bit of guidance. This section also has some links to get additional information, such as going directly to the rules and regulations that pertain to your harvest. So really, once we get into this and go through the demo, I think it'll become pretty clear how you operate the system, and you'll find that it's really fairly simple and intuitive to use. This slide here just supports what was said and covered in the previous slide. It goes through a little bit of the process again. You can see in the lower left, there's an arrow showing the direction that you move through the different steps. And when you are creating a FON and working on a FON, you can always move back to edit what you have been working on. Again, it's not going to let you move forward unless you've finished a step entirely. This is the overview page, and this is just a screenshot of the overview page, so you're not seeing the whole thing. But on this overview, this is your step one on that little timeline. You will indicate what your role is in the harvest. And again, to complete the notification, you need to be either a landowner or a designated agent, but you can also be a harvester or a forester. You will need to indicate the start date of your harvest, and automatically it will populate with a 2-year maximum time frame. The other information that you enter in this step is the town that you're working in, the name of the nearest road, and the parcel acreage. So there is some acreage checks within this FOResT system that are kind of nice as well. And we'll talk about that briefly in this overview. So the mapping, this is, as I said, a pretty nice feature. If you are used to working with Google Earth or Google Maps or any of the online mapping programs, I think you're going to find this pretty simple to use. You move around the map and zoom in and zoom out pretty in a similar way to using Google Earth and Google Maps. When you've entered your town in that overview page and you move to the mapping page, your town is going to magically appear on the map. You will be centered in that town. The base maps or the background can be switched from topographic to aerial imagery. And the aerial imagery, I believe, is going to be the most recent Esri imagery that's available. So there's some pretty nice options there. Let me see if I can advance and show the aerial. Yeah, so there's aerial imagery there. The other thing that's going to appear on these maps, on the background maps, are the statewide standard zones, so the buffers for streams and rivers and ponds, and the LUPC subdistricts are going to appear. What you will not see is if you're working in an organized town that has not adopted statewide standards, you will not see the zoning for those towns. So you'll only get the zoning in statewide standards and LUCP towns. The process of digitizing your activities on these maps is pretty simple. It's probably similar to other types of programs that folks have used that are currently out there. The things that you will need to digitize are polygon or harvest areas. You can digitize lines for road construction, and you can put in points for permanent and temporary stream crossings. You can also have multiple harvests within the same town. You just can't have multiple towns on one notification. That's the same as it's always been. So here you can see that we've put in a harvest area. This is in a I believe it's in a non-statewide standards town, a non-LUPC town, because I don't believe I'm seeing any shoreland zoning indicated. And there's also a stream crossing that's been located on this map as well. So the activities that you draw on the map are going to be listed below. So you can see that that harvest area polygon has been determined to be 20.1 acres. And you can save that once you've completed it and you're satisfied with it, or you can edit that polygon. And Greg and Mort, well, Greg, I believe, is going to show you how to do those edits and manipulate the polygon. The same thing with the water crossing. When you have a water crossing, you need to indicate if it's permanent or temporary, and whether it's a skid trail crossing or it's for a haul road. And you can save that once you're satisfied that you've put that in correctly. You can also delete these features if you want and start over again. One nice thing is once you start to create one of these features like a harvest area or a road, you will get instructions. As you see in this gray charcoal colored box here in the middle of the screen, it gives you directions on how to do the digitizing for that particular item that you want to draw on the map. Something else I can point out on this slide is that we have a road, and this is kind of hidden for me because there's something on my screen blocking it, but it looks like the length of that road segment is appearing right here. I can't see that for some reason, so I'm just taking a guess at what I'm pointing out with my cursor. Once you have completed your map, put in your harvest area, any roads or water crossings, your next step is going to be the activity details. And the activity details are, the questions for this are adjusted to some degree based on your map. So based on the town that you're going to be working in, whether it's statewide standards or LUPC, and the questions will also be based on the activities that you put on the map. So for instance, if you put a road on a LUPC town, unorganized town, then there's going to be some questions specific to that activity. Similarly, if you are working in a statewide standards town and the harvest area is in a statewide standards town working in riparian buffers, there's going to be questions regarding the harvest in those buffers. Are you going to harvest 40% of the volume, leave 60 square feet of basal area, or do an outcome-based option? So the nice thing about the activity detail questions is they are tailored to the map that you create to some extent. This is one of the checks that I was referring to, harvest activity. When you enter the harvest size, the size has to be less than or equal to the parcel size that you indicated on the overview page. Change of use, if you click yes that there is a change of use, there is a menu of categories to select from. These are kind of general, like agriculture. You don't have to specify that you're going to put it into potato production or blueberries. I think agriculture is what you're going to select from the menu. So this is sort of a new little change to the FON system. Checking my notes here to see if there's anything else that I need to discuss. And I think the last thing I have is just the recurring theme here is that you can't move from page to page unless the information in the step that you're working on has been completed and is correct. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mort, and he's going to finish the overview presentation, and I will stick around to help answer questions if I can at the end. Thank you.
Great. So, Dan, if you want to. Okay, so we got the next slide. I'm getting a little echo, so I don't know if somebody has to mute at this point. Okay, sounds better. So the next step, as Dan was describing earlier, is to enter contacts. You've already identified yourself as the notifier. You're either the landowner or a designated agent. And at this point, you can add other parties to the notification, anyone else who's going to be associated with this notification, whether that's a harvester or a licensed forester. And we'll look at this in a moment. But basically, this is the point at which you say, here's who else belongs to this notification in addition to me as the notifier. There may actually be situations where you, the notifier, are also the landowner, are also the harvester, could potentially also be the licensed forester. So it's important to remember that people can play multiple roles in a notification in the same way that on the paper form you could have entered yourself in multiple places on that notification. In order to add someone else to the notification, there has to be a bit of pre-planning, a little communication ahead of time. You can't simply say, well, I think I'll have so-and-so as my forester or as my harvester, or, you know, I'm filling this out for a landowner that I haven't really talked to yet. None of that is going to be possible with this system, because in order to add someone to a notification, you have to have their last name and their FOResT ID number. So this presumes that those other parties have already created a FOResT account and have that FOResT ID number set up. And you will have communicated with them ahead of time and said, you know, I'm creating this notification. I'll need your FOResT ID number in order to add you to that notification. Essentially, this is a system that protects parties from having their information entered and become available to everybody else who might be using the system. So you probably want to protect your FOResT ID number a little bit. You don't want to publish that or make it widely available. In the unlikely event that somebody did add you to a notification that you weren't aware of because they already had your FOResT ID number, you can certainly decline after the fact, but better to only give your FOResT ID number to folks that are going to be submitting notifications or using that in an appropriate way, something that you've already agreed to. Next slide. So this is what, if you want to back up just one, Dan, there we go. So this is what it looks like when you enter that contact page. The first piece of information certainly is the landowner. In this example, this is a notification that I created as designated agent and licensed forester. So in that situation, I need to go back and enter the landowner's information. And I do so by, again, entering the name and then entering the forest ID number. I then click Find Landowner, and the system will look for a landowner with that last name and that forest ID number. Again, if they've already created an account, it should pop right up. If they have not created an account, it's going to say we don't recognize that name and ID number. So they also already have to have that account. The next click. So I've entered the last name, Lord, and that forest ID number, and it pops right up, shows me who that landowner is, and I just have a couple more questions to answer there in terms of the acreage that landowner owns in Maine and the ownership type. These are questions that typically come sort of at the end of the process with a landowner report, but we've put them in here just to enable folks to sort of categorize that ownership from the outset. The next click. So in this instance, as I said, I entered myself as the designated agent, and so my information as designated agent is pre-populated. I'm the notifier. In this section, in the contact section, my information pops right up there. So, so I don't need to enter that. The last bit there is the harvester and operator information. The next click, Dan. Basically, I'm entering a name there, and again, I need to enter a forest ID number before I can find that harvester or operator and add them to the notification. The next, please. So having added those folks to the notification, I, as the notifier, the ones pulling together this information, I have a couple more steps with this summary. When we say certification, we essentially mean that you are signing and certifying that the information is correct. So in this summary section, you will see a checkbox. You'll see the information for each section that you've filled in, and a checkbox that says essentially that you're agreeing that the information is correct. It will give you an option, or require you actually to acknowledge some of the notices that pop up, things that Dan mentioned about certain zones or requirements that may be associated with the activity that you've described in your previous sections. And it'll also ask you to acknowledge that you've read some of the additional notes that are in there, things about quarantines, things about permits that may be required. So essentially, this is a review section where you go through the summary and review all of that information and check that you have read it and you've entered the correct information. Once you've confirmed everything, you as the notifier will certify it, essentially again by clicking the buttons, and we'll show you this in a moment. As soon as you have, as the notifier, have certified it, other parties will get an email. It's almost instantaneous. It's it'll be in a matter of minutes. The other parties that you've identified will get an email and ask them that will ask them to certify and provide them with a link to review the information and basically click their certification of it as well. Once all the parties have certified the notification as it is, the notification is complete. The system will automatically generate a forest operations notification number, that 7-digit number that Dan described, and everyone will get an acknowledgement that yes, the notification is complete, and here's your notification number. The next, please, Dan. So again, this is what that looks like. This is the beginning of the summary page. I'm you know, these screenshots are only showing you a section of the full page, and I think a lot of this will become clearer when Greg goes through his demo, because you'll see the whole page live as he's working through it. But essentially, this is a notification. If you click the next, Dan, it'll highlight that this is still a draft notification that you're working on. So the notification is not complete, it's not active yet. It's a draft, and if you read through this and saw information that you needed to change, you could still go back and do that. It would be quite easy to go to earlier sections and correct some of this information. So the next, Dan. So each section will show you the information that you have entered. So the contact information is there, the overview information that you entered is there. The next click, Dan, highlights that at the bottom of each of those sections is a little checkbox. The language there has changed a little bit. In your image, it says mark as read. We've changed that to be a little bit clearer. I think the language now says, I certify that this information is correct, basically giving you an opportunity to say, yes, I've read through this, and it's all accurate. I didn't make any mistakes in this. The next, Dan. You'll also see, in addition to the information that you entered, as Dan described, here's some of those reminders and notices that the system generates based on the information that you've entered. So there are some general reminders. For example, it's always a good idea to check with the town or the municipality about any local ordinances. We certainly recommend that in any instance. There's a reminder that you're still responsible for all the rules that apply, so make sure that you're familiar with those before you begin. And just a general reminder that planning ahead makes things go much more smoothly with harvest operations. In this example that we're using, there could have been some harvest reminders that are associated directly with the harvest area that you identified. But in this case, there are no reminders. There's nothing particular about that. The same is true of road construction. As you saw, there was a road construction area indicated at the end, but there's nothing particular that you need to know about the road construction. In this example, there was a water crossing, and if you'll recall, it was a skid trail crossing, but it was a permanent crossing. So here's a reminder that responds to that activity that you entered. It says there's a permanent water crossing that you proposed in an organized town, and therefore, because it's a permanent crossing, you will need a permit by rule to be submitted to Maine Forest Service and approved prior to installing that crossing. At this time, there's no the FOResT system doesn't include permits, so this is still a completely separate process to obtain a permit by rule from Maine Forest Service. That's also on our webpage, but there's no direct link. This is just a reminder in the notification process that you also have to get that permit by rule. So there are other similar kinds of reminders that you might encounter through the various situations that you're notifying. The next, please. So before you have read through all of that information and confirmed, checked all those boxes for each section, you won't actually be able to certify this notification. You'll notice the last box there is not checked, and the certify button is still gray. It can't be checked yet. So if you go to the next, Dan, this now shows you that you've checked all the boxes, everything has been read and confirmed, and now that button is live. You can certify this notification. The next, please. Once you've certified, click that certify button. Here's your this is your final answer, as it were. So it's responding to the information that it's getting. So in this instance, it's saying, okay, you have identified yourself as the designated agent and the licensed forester, and you're certifying that the answers to the questions are correct to the best of your knowledge. That's a box that you need to check. There's another box that says, as the designated agent, I understand that I've taken on a particular set of responsibilities for this operation. And so this is the acknowledgement as a designated agent that I've taken on responsibilities for this harvest. And I need to check that box. And finally, here's just the last section is the reminder that says, okay, you're about to acknowledge and certify this notification, but you have to understand that the notification won't be complete and finalized with Maine Forest Service until the other parties that you've identified have also reviewed and certified their acceptance of this notification. And the process, as we've described, is that the notification number will be generated once the other parties have certified, and then the FON becomes active and all the parties are notified of that number. So that's the final acknowledgement. When you check all those boxes, you will get that the button that says acknowledge and certify will become live. That's your last opportunity to edit this information. Once you, as the notifier, have acknowledged and certified the notification that you've created, it won't be editable anymore prior to the other parties certifying the notification. So essentially, that information all gets locked down, because essentially you can't change information after another party is certified, because then they basically would be certifying something that you've edited after the fact. So we want to make sure that everybody is certifying the same set of information. If there are errors, someone else can decline to certify, and they could call you up and say, hey, you sent in this notification and I'm supposed to certify it, but there's some mistakes there. At that point, what you could do is you could go in and withdraw that notification. The withdrawal process just sends it back to draft mode. The information isn't lost, but at that point you'd correct the information, go through this summary process again, and then it would get sent out again to the other parties for them to certify. So if you go to the next, Dan, that's going to show you essentially how this process will look. Essentially, you will get this notice that the other part that you've certified successfully, the other contacts have been notified, and you can still view the summary of the information, but it's no longer editable unless you decide that you want to withdraw the notification. So you just acknowledge this with an OK. The next, Dan. As we said, this is now a FON that's in the system and pending certification by all parties to the notification. You can still withdraw this notification if someone says, hey, this is incorrect information, or you notice that there's something incorrect. But basically, at this stage, you're just waiting for the other parties to also certify the notification. The next, Dan. Yeah, just emphasizing this is pending certification. It's not a completed notification yet. The next. So the other parties that receive or that have been identified on a notification, they are going to get an email link to the notification. They're going to get an email that we'll look at one in just a moment, but essentially they'll get this email based on the account information that they have that says you are identified as a party to this notification. They will be given an opportunity to review the information, confirm its accuracy, and to essentially click a button to sign the notification. And as we've described, once all parties have signed the notification, the system automatically acknowledges the notification as complete and sends out that 7-digit notification number to all parties. The system also allows you to print a posting sheet with that FON number direct from the system. The next, please. So this is an image, just an example. The wording is not exact, but essentially this is the email that parties will get. It says, and this is a different sample or dummy notification, but essentially the email says there's a notification that's been created by so-and-so, in this case by Fred Lord, through FOResT, and it's currently in pending mode and needs to be certified by all the parties. So this email is coming to me as a landowner. It identifies me as the landowner and says, you must certify the information is correct and certify the correctness or the completeness of the notification. At the bottom is the live link that essentially says this is where you go to look at that information and to certify it. And again, this is a process that Greg will go through in the demo in a little bit more detail so that you can actually see it step by step. The next, please, Dan. So just to sort of summarize, the timeline is that this system has gone live as of January 1st. There is a transition period where any of the current paper-based notifications that have been submitted in the past that are still valid will continue to be valid throughout their original notification period, so up to 2 years from the time that they were submitted. So there are going to be a couple of years where we will have notifications that were submitted on paper that could still be valid. And because we recognize that this will take a little bit of time to get used to, and as we've said, we're also making some additional tweaks and adjustments to the system, we are still accepting paper-based notifications until the end of March. And of course, as before, a notification can be valid for up to 2 years. So again, there's going to be this transition period where for a short time yet we will still accept paper-based notifications, and anything was submitted on paper will continue to be valid for the full original notification period. The next, please, Dan. So we recognize that there will be lots of questions about this. We've already gotten lots of questions. The standard place to get answers or to submit questions is through the main Forest Service Augusta number, which if you have used that number before, you know that you get one of a couple of people, Stephen Nicholas in particular. You can also send an email if you have questions with this. There are instances where we've gotten questions and we've said, gee, that's a good question. We'll need to get back to you, so please bear with us. There are some interesting questions that are coming in, and obviously it's as Greg described, a bit of a work in progress. There are also already some great resources as to some of the more common questions that we've gotten. So on our webpage, there are how-to videos. Greg has assembled a list of those that they're just brief videos, a minute or two, that highlight a particular step. If you're having trouble with it, you can identify, how do I create an account? There's a short video about that. You can also see this recording or the recording of this presentation and past presentations. You can review those in their entirety or in part, and any of these future presentations that we're doing will also be recorded. Certainly, if you prefer the live version, there are a number. It's actually up through March. I think there are 5 or 6 additional presentations, webinars that we're going to be doing. So if you prefer, you can sit through this again and get a slightly different take on things, ask questions that perhaps have just come to you. And if you're ready or if you're comfortable, the system is live. So there are instructions and there's a live link to go to FOResT to start using the system. And there are already notifications that have begun coming in using the FOResT system. So I think at this point, I believe that's the last slide. So we'll just leave that up for a moment. And Greg, I think you can chime in if you have anything you want to add. We can take a few questions now. And I'll turn it over to you as far as whether you want to take a bit of a break before moving into the demo.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. If there are any questions, we can take a few right now, and then we'll probably take a 10-minute break and then dive into a more in-depth demo of FOResT. So if anybody has any questions, you can come off mute now and ask them.
And people are also welcome to type questions into the chat. Greg, it sounds like we have a quiet group this morning.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah.
Okay.
If we want to take a break now, we'll come back at about. Well, let's just keep it simple and just say at 9:15. So just like 11 minutes from now, take a break. There's no need to leave the meeting itself. Just make sure your camera's off and your microphone is muted, and you can step away. And then we'll get back started at 9:15. Thank you.
In the meantime, if you do think of a question, you want to just type it into the chat, we can try to address that when we come back.